Hello, and welcome to a special Thanksgiving episode of Prose. To all those in the United States that are celebrating Thanksgiving, I hope you're having a happy one surrounded by those that you love. For the special today, what we are going to do is have a small short story, a la the old flash fiction that Prose started with about food. It might be a bit darker than what most would give a Thanksgiving special leeway to be, but it'll do. Also, I will include an original poem. Though we are called Prose here at the show, we do love poetry just as well. So please sit back, relax, take a moment from your eating and your loving and your living, and listen to this nice, quick, happy Thanksgiving episode from Prose. Enjoy. The Food, an original short story by Jared I. McGee. Giuseppe lived chiefly in the past anymore. Then again, that was true of almost everyone in Limbo. The present was relatively bland. Gray heaped upon gray, eternity spanning out, an eternity of nothing too terribly bad and nothing too terribly good. True and utter nothingness. Many would consider this a gift. There were plenty of people that had been cut out of Limbo, their bad deeds damning them to molten hills and biting cold and oddly specific punishments. He should be somewhat thankful for his nothingness. The alternative that he had laid out before him was, to be sure, hellish, torment after torment, stretching out into infinity. The oddity here was that the very nature of Limbo caused the interactions of its denizens to take on an odd, hollow quality that Giuseppe was already accustomed to. If nature begat culture, then Limbo ensured that the weather, or the lack thereof, the daily doings, or the lack thereof, and the latest gossip, or the lack thereof, became the conversation he needed to endure. Truly, though, this was no different from his daily life before death. Unlike many of Limbo, this was a slice of home gifted him by God. In life, when Giuseppe was not chopping vegetables, doubling various recipes to stretch the outcome to handle a forthcoming heavy dine-out night in his town, or generally sharing his culinary gifts with the world, he was enduring this same drivel from those same masses of this same world. Everyone always wanted to speak with the chef. This was terribly common at every decent restaurant across the globe, and his was no exception. Diners were even more keen to leap onto discussions of an amendment to any addendums that the owners would toss onto the menu. These last-minute shifts to earlier last-minute changes were obnoxious to the chef and his crew, but the owners could care less. They could care even less that Giuseppe was doomed to schmooze with all the sheep eating at their establishment. It was downright painful. Giuseppe would give anything for that pain now, though. These repetitive tubs of drivel that made up every moment of every day. He didn't sleep, so there was no end. He didn't get to end his shift, so there was no end. Gray heaped upon gray, eternity yawning out, never ending, what he wouldn't give for something, anything, to jolt them all out of this. He was also a bit unsure what hell might have held for him. As a chef, food was Giuseppe's life. Now he had only vague memories of what food tasted like, what a full stomach felt like, what the smiles on customers' faces looked like. But here in Limbo, he actually could still cook. The problem was that when a ghostly chef cooked for other shades, it was pointless. They don't need or want sustenance. The art that was his food turned gray and lumpy when it touched a plate. The smells disappeared and dissipated before it reached their non-corporeal spirit noses. And the tastes? They might as well have eaten dust and ash. There was no taste, there was no texture, the food was not food, and his gift was worthless in this place. If this is what eternity was like in Limbo, hell must be so far beyond anything Giuseppe could begin to think up that he was loath to continue trying. But that was the thing about his thoughts in Limbo too. They seemed to disappear just beyond grasp, making him quite forgetful about anything in what served as the now. The past was ever present though, torturing him in this bland nothing sphere. The only thing that would occasionally break the monotony was a strange rumble that Giuseppe perceived as thunder. The only comparison he knew to make, a fragment from his past on Earth. The rumbling would come from some indistinguishable up that escaped his and the other Limbo residents' understanding or observation. They would hear it, feel it coming from the relative above, and they would briefly ponder on what those in heaven might be doing that caused such an exciting ruckus. But that fire in their bellies would disappear, and their thoughts would push away from grasping and pondering, and they would forget that the thunder ever had rolled through it all. Giuseppe lived chiefly in the past anymore. Then again, that was true of almost everyone in Limbo. The present was relatively bland, gray heaped upon gray, eternity spanning out, an eternity of nothing too terribly bad, and nothing too terribly good. True and utter nothingness. Next up, we have an original poem. This is The World is Burning. The world is burning, so we must light a fire. But what of the vixen and her 3 pups that live in the rock wall on the edge of the meadow? You said she was important. What of the rock wall itself, a remnant of a bygone time, history made tangible? They are regrettable casualties, a small sacrifice to save the many. The world is suffocating, so we must fell those trees. But what of the fisher cat in her domain? She stalks the shadows here and bowers in this wood. What of the breath these mighty pines and maples exhale into the world, expanding her lungs, filling them with crisp, clean air? They are necessary deaths in this war, a life debt to even the scales of doom. The world is starving, so we must strip her of her fruits. But she has so few left. If we strip her of more, she will cease to be. The world is dying, so we must find new ways to save her while still harming her beyond repair. But doesn't that defeat the purpose? Aren't we killing her with our kindnesses as well as with the atrocities we commit? Isn't the remedy equally destructive? We must isolate, eradicate, amputate the sickness. This will require drastic measures. We must rape her to save her, be she ravaged or not. The world is burning, so we must light a fire. Thank you for listening to this Thanksgiving special from Prose. All sounds you hear come from freesound.org and freemusicarchive.com. They are being used under CC 01.0 Universal Public Domain Dedication licenses. We will be back with our regular episodes in the coming weeks, but again, I wanted to throw something out there just to wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for your patience for this flash fiction and, in truth, an unfinished poem that I hope to go on, revise, and publish in the near future. Enjoy your day, and I'll see you here for our next episode of Prose.